Hello and welcome to the Dustin and Eric podcast show brought to you by Mimosa Networks. Hi, I'm Dustin.
And I'm Eric.
Today we're on part 2, episode 12, where we'll talk about antenna alignment. Again, joining us is Jeff Jones and Art Feldman.
Hey guys.
Thanks,
Good to see you
guys.
Yeah.
So we'll jump right into alignment. So
Art, Jeff.
alignment seems to be a really common issue with any vendor, any antenna, with anybody out there, especially for greenhorn people who've never done it before. They get a signal, they get connected, they think they're done. Where almost always they're on some kind of side lobe. I've had 3 or 4 customers just this past week that I've emailed with, corresponded with. They said, "Oh, this link sucks. Why does it suck?" And so I go through and ask them, what type of antenna are you using? Did you make sure that you figured out which direction this is pointed in? Just general questions about their installation. One guy said, "Oh, we pointed it at a pole. We think it's the right pole." He comes back and says, "Oh, we accidentally pointed it at a flagpole, and our other end is actually behind some trees."
So you're going through a whole slew of troubleshooting questions, but the meat and potatoes is, have you peaked it?
Yeah. And are you sure you're not connected to a side lobe? Like there's another guy who had a B11, and he's connected at -75. I can't get this any better. And so we actually have a cool video that Eric and I are in with a B11 alignment, which it's a general alignment part in that video. It tells you how to peak your antenna. You want to take your antenna all the way to the left till you lose signal, all the way to the right till you lose signal. Then you want to bring it back to the middle where you had the best signal. And you do that same thing for, antenna tilt up until you lose signal, down till you lose signal, bring it back to the middle. And almost every time that should get you, right where you need to be. And you have to do this one antenna at a time, one end at a time. You can't be playing with both ends at the same time because you're never going to get that aligned.
Rule number 1, yeah. And we'll be on two-way radios often if we're in that range. And we'll say, "Hey, I'm gonna do my side first. I'm gonna do my azimuth first. It doesn't matter. I'll do my azimuth first." The other thing is once we get blue lights and everything's linked up, peaked or not, but it's linked, I like to take a Sharpie out and tick mark the mount and whatever part of hardware, whether it's a hose clamp on a small radio or it's a big Gyrus on an 11 gig system. I'll tick mark some things. That way I have some relative starting point in case I lose when I'm doing my azimuth.
That's a good one.
I can always get back to home base. Right, so you have an emergency thing. Maybe you linked up. It's dense fog. You got 1/10 of a mile visibility. I don't care what part of the spectrum you're on, but you can't see the other guy. He doesn't have a halogen lamp on that side. Whatever. There's the landmark is that tree down at the below down there, which is 1/10 of a mile. That's all you get. And so I like to tick mark a few points as and L, and when I have some kind of link.
That's a great suggestion.
Right.
Jeff will agree that I would say 70% of our calls, the reason they're having the problem in the first place is alignment.
Right.
So we'll see, and getting the right target, I think, is a great starting point. So you actually know where am I supposed to be at. So you can use the design tool like Dustin's showing up here, or you can actually our product will give you the actual target you're supposed to shoot for. If you're a lot of times you may be 10, 15 dB off your target, and then you're seeing phi numbers go up and down. You're seeing your performance go up and down. Once they get it within 2-3 dB,
Right.
my God, you see such a
Let
huge
the,
difference in performance.
So real quick before you cut in. So Art, I see my target level at neg 112. Why is that? And should I shoot for that? Or what's wrong here? What's going on?
So as you know, the antenna gain is missing or it's incorrectly numbered. So basically,
It's not adjusted.
So
it's not factored in.
So we have, as Dustin mentioned, we have two types of products, right? We have the connectorized antenna and we have the integrated antenna. Integrated antenna, don't worry about it. We've told you what the antenna is, and the target is automatically picking up the antenna. On a connectorized product, where you have to actually enter the antenna gain, if you don't enter it correctly, guess what happens to your target value? It won't be. And like Dustin said, you're going to get 112.
Right. So there's a lot of people out there who cheat and don't put in antenna gain and then wonder why their target value is incorrect. So because you're not configuring your radio correctly, you're not getting the correct value. So if you need that data to align your radio, which most often or not you do, it's probably best if you actually put in the correct antenna gain for your connection.
Is it still true if I'm on the general dashboard, regardless of the radio, the UI on the radio? If I'm on the general dashboard and I see that, and I'm looking at my RSSI right there, does that still take a little more? Say I make a movement, I'm trying to peak, get a better signal. Does that refresh on that RSSI? Is that still a little slower than if I go to the target aiming page, the aiming target page, which is faster? That's still faster, regardless of firmware and across the radio board, right? Go to the aiming tab and aim there. You'll get a faster RSI recovery.
So to answer your very long-winded question,
Yeah, right.
Eric,
Help me out here.
So
Help me out.
basically, you're talking about the dashboard UI compared to
Yeah.
the aiming tool.
Aiming.
So the aiming tool is quicker and
Yeah.
much more responsive than the actual dashboard UI.
Mm-hmm.
The dashboard UI is updating a lot of different data at the same time. It's not just focused
Right.
straight on the actual dB or the target of the radio. So if you hit the aiming tool, that's all the radio is focusing on
It's
at the
focused
moment.
on just
Right.
the RSSI.
I think it
a good
refreshes
point, yeah.
once per second.
Yeah.
You got to let the change on these links and different 5 and 10 gig. You got to let the change recover too. So we'll go to the main dashboard, drop down to the bottom right, and look at the error rates, and then look at the change and the SNRs and stuff, and let those see how your horizontal and vertical change, see how everything's doing.
Right,
So
that's
they kind of balance.
After channel change?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
well, no, after just a signal adjustment.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
That's a common mistake if you do it too quick. You might breeze right by the optimal signal value.
Yeah.
So make an adjustment, wait a couple seconds, and then adjust accordingly.
Right.
And do one side at the time too, or you'll be there
Right.
all day long.
And depending on what frequency you're using, you should make
Yeah.
quarter turns or eighth of turns. If it's a higher frequency radio, you want to do very, very small, very minute adjustments.
Yep.
5 gig is a little more forgiving. 2.4, 900 megahertz is a lot more forgiving, but you need to, regardless of the type of radio or frequency you're using, you always need to do slow quarter or eighth turns depending on what you're doing.
Make an adjustment and wait. Make an adjustment and wait, and continue in the same direction, like say to the right, and then it was, as you first mentioned, and watch that signal go down. We want that thing to get worse and worse, and to make sure we're off the lobes, and then go back to the primary lobe.
And I know it's scary to lose that
Right.
what you think's a good signal. I still don't like doing proper alignment because I'm scared to lose that good signal.
Yeah.
But if you do it right, you'll get a better signal.
right.
Yeah. Well, I remember the time you and I did that installation of the B-24 radios out there on the coastline, and both of us were on walkie-talkies, and I remember it worked out really well where you were making the adjustment and I was calling out the RSSI signal, and it really worked well because we were able to make the changes in real time.
So you're in range. It's a lot easier on it, like a FM, like a simplex handheld
Yeah, we were
radio,
using FRS
instead of trying to
radios. Yeah.
text or Slack back and forth with some kind
No,
of delay
no.
potentially.
The good old-fashioned
Yeah,
walkie-talkies
right.
work great because you can
with you.
communicate with the other person, and it'll. I really believe I've heard people doing it, but I've heard people actually installing and aligning radios with one person, and
Yeah.
that's just you're set up for failure.
I've done it. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
We all do it.
Just bring someone else along, and nothing else. Have them call out the signal report as you're making an adjustment. You'll save yourself a lot of time, effort, and
And then a wrap on that. So we'll peak the azimuth. I'll communicate to the other end of the link. Hey, I'm peaking my azimuth. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to lock my azimuth down right here. So you lock that down carefully, and then I'm going to do my elevation. A little up. So hang tight. Move it a little more. Hang tight. Let it recover, and back down. Get that peak, and then tighten that up. And I think I'm satisfied. I communicate to the guy on the other side. Okay, it's your turn. He's on the station side. He does the same procedure.
So a couple of more things here is you can also use landmarks to help you get your radio somewhat aligned.
Yeah.
Once you get connection, then it's a whole lot easier. But you have to aim to get the radio connected first before you can really do fine tuning. So what I do is, I study both sides of the link. I look at Google Maps or the design tool, pick out some stuff that's easily identifiable when I'm out in the field. And I know that I need to shoot over it, to the left of it, to the right of it. And that way I can get my radio in the general direction. It'll link up sometimes at neg 80, sometimes at neg 60. It depends. But at least after that point, it's easier to actually get your radio dialed in and locked down at that point.
If I can't lock in, I can scan for ID, see if my radio on the other side's in the field there, in the vision there, and lock in on that. Maybe I've got a character out of whack for the credentials for the link too. So you can go to the scan ID on the link tab and
Right.
grab it that way.
Great comment, because we'll do that all the time. We'll tell customers, and you can do that from the station side. Right, because from the AP side, you're only going to pick up other APs. Station side, you do a scan for SSID, and then it'll pick up anything it's actually seeing. So that's a great comment.
One note on azimuth and finding the other side of the link off the tools. Most of this stuff is true north. Is that not correct?
As far as the map
These
goes,
are all as far as the map. This is true north. So you guys
Correct.
get out there with your iPhones and look at the compass because you're going 42 miles or 3 miles, and you get your iPhone out. Make sure that that's on true. Set your compass on your smartphone to true north, because maybe you want to double check your work, and you get a $15 compass out, lensatic magnetic compass. Guess what? That's magnetic north. And in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, we're about 14 degrees difference. That could make all the world of maybe you don't get quite the link or not. So you got to adjust for declination.
Yep.
So just make sure your smartphones, if that's what you're using, is on true north. So that way it lines up with your map tool.
So real quick here, I know that you guys said alignment's about 70% of your calls or your chats. What are the steps that you go through with your customers to figure that out? That's their issue, and to get them to actually fix their issue.
Well, I think the first thing is to identify that the radio is set up properly. We've seen where customers, like Art had shared, where they did not have the antenna gain set properly. So the target value was negative 112. So getting that number correct by putting the proper gain of the antenna into the access point radio is the first thing that needs to happen. The second thing I would say is, just ensure that the SSID and encryption key or password is set properly on both sides so that the radios will, in fact, link up. I think that's really important as well. And then the other thing is I always like to start off, if it's a radio that has 20, 40, or 80 megahertz channel, I like to start off on a non-DFS channel, preferably 20 megahertz wide, so that your spectral density will ensure that your signal is nice and strong and will be seen on both sides of the link. So, you can always adjust the size of the channel or the amount of power later on, but starting off, you should try doing a 1x20 non-DFS channel.
Good one.
Yeah, so I guess rely on your target and rely on the design tool for your signal level. Start there, understand what your signal level should be, and then when you're actually seeing your link, you can see how far off are you from your goals.
And make sure you're pointed in the right direction.
It's funny you said that, because we were talking about earlier, I was thinking about some times that we've done some pretty crazy things back in the day when I was in the field. Way back then, we stopped at a Safeway and got some shiny balloons and hung them up on the access point side.
Awesome.
And we were shooting a signal across a river up in Oregon, and it was really hard to see the access point, but when we put the balloons on the access point, it made it really easy to identify the location. And as funny as that sounds, it actually worked. The other thing too is having a pair of good binoculars is really important, along with a good compass. Again, it doesn't cost a whole lot of money, but it'll save you a lot of time if you have the right tools.
I think the balloon idea is a great idea, except if you have wind.
Wind can be a deal closer, yeah.
It's all the way apart.
Well,
where's my balloon?
Yeah. We even tried using lasers and gun scopes and all these other crazy ideas.
Shooting at each other.
Well, no, I wouldn't say shooting.
Yeah, you're close.
Yeah. Fire for effect. But no, we tried that, and the laser actually worked. But by the time you get it set up and calibrated, you could have already done the alignment.
Well, you can go flare. You can shoot some flares up at the station, flares at the AP, and then load some tracers. Well, that's how we did in field artillery anyway.
Yeah.
But.
SOS. No. He just aligns his antenna.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
But
get creative.
Right.
all right, guys. Well, thank you very much for being on the show again. Definitely very good information for us and for the folks out in the field, for new and experienced customers alike. So Appreciate it, and we'll see everybody on our next episode of the Dustin and Eric podcast show.
Thanks, Art. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks,
Hey, you're
Eric.
welcome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dustin.
guys.
Thanks. Eric.
Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe or follow button to stay up to date with our latest podcast, which will be available on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud.